So, smudging is a technique that helps to clear away old, stagnant, negative energy. And it's been a technique used for hundreds, if not thousands of years by different cultures around the world. I first heard about smudging back when I was just starting out as a psychic and I was developing my own abilities because it was recommended that you need to clear away energy and you sustain a high vibration or a high energy state regularly, not only while you are practicing and developing, but also just to make sure that the energy in your home, in your space, with you is consistently high vibrational. The Catholic Church, back when I used to go to church regularly, the priests, whenever they entered the church, they would have this cauldron that was filled with a type of incense, and they would just swing that cauldron around, and the smoke would kind of waft and kind of go into the different areas. The Egyptian culture used to use a lot of different, say, smudging techniques as well with different herbs. I know kapal is something that was used quite often. It really depends on the culture and their practices and why they used to do it. But it is a very helpful technique for clearing energy out. There's a really great film, I think it's called Waking Up. And there's a gentleman in the film who suddenly becomes very aware of energy, not only emotionally, but also visually. He starts to experience and see um, energy in some form or fashion. So he thought this whole thing was mumbo jumbo until he started having these experiences. And then someone had told him about smudging with sage and he began using it. And he said he would visually see when he would go into rooms or spaces where people, where he sensed negativity or he could see it as soon as he lit the sage bundle and began wafting the smoke around, especially in the corners. The negativity would like scram or would like take off. It didn't want to be around in that area. The Native American culture has been using smudging techniques for many, many years. A lot of shamanistic practices incorporated as part of the process of healing and helping others to regain themselves if they are suffering from some sort of illness or if they are going through some sort of psycho spiritual situation or attack of some sort. But it really just depends on what you would want to use it for yourself. Many times when I'm talking to clients, and you can tell they're in a funk, you can kind of sense it because just their energy feels very low vibration, and it could be for different reasons. It could be that they just went through a really tough time. Some people coming out of a breakup, I mean, their energy is pretty low vibration. Some people who have gone through a loss, low vibrational energy. It's all understandable. There are some people who are naturally acclimated to low vibrational energy because they were conditioned to function and operate that way from their family and their culture. Usually, when I am connecting with those kinds of clients and they are not sure where to start, I always recommend that they take up the practice of smudging because it is kind of like, let's say you go to a school, you're in a classroom and there's a lot of stuff on the chalkboard. And then you go and you need to put something on the chalkboard. You need to write something yourself, but you kind of can't because there isn't space, there isn't room for it to fit. So you take a eraser and you erase the chalkboard, and then you can write something down, you can put something on there. It's the same process with smudging. Everything that you live around or reside when, for example, your home, your items like your cell phone, everything that you possess, everything that you are connected to your home, including your home, it retains energy. It's something that's kind of like a sponge. It'll absorb energy over and over and over again during the course of you being in that space, not just from you, but also from other outside influences as well. I think that's why I'm really picky about who comes into my space, who comes into my home, who I allow into my direct energy exchange, because I know that whoever I'm going to be dealing with, they are going to come in with a bunch of energy. And I want to make sure that the energy that is coming into my um interaction or my presence, my being, is going to be more higher vibration. I still connect with people who are on lower vibrational modes, but that doesn't mean that that's something I regularly encounter or consistently encounter. So I'm kind of an energy picky person. And when it comes to my home, when it comes to my space, that is all also like a sponge. It soaks up energy, it soaks up something. So people coming into my space, they're going to release stuff here. And that's why I'm really picky about who comes into my home or who I share my space with. But it's also the same thing with me as well, because we are energy beings. We are constantly vibrating energetically on a low or high or median kind of level. And because we are vibrating and we are expelling energy, it is being released into your space. I use California white desert sage. It's my favorite. It smells in my opinion, it smells sweet, and it doesn't have as much of a burnt smell to it. Here in New Mexico, we do have a local sagebush that is used for a lot of the local rituals. And if you go to some of the shops here, et cetera, they have like baskets filled with it, especially around springtime, because that's when the sage bushes are beginning to grow, and they're picking them and they're going ahead and delivering them at all the shops that sell them. So you can buy a lot of that here, which is, it's really pretty and it smells so good when it's freshly picked. But I don't really care for the way it smells when you burn it, because it still smells like something's burning inside your home, and I don't really care for that scent. There's also sage in the form of an incense stick. There's also sage in like incense cones. There's resin where there is kind of like a crystallized resin that comes from sage. I know they sell those as well. Some people will use copal, which is another type of resin. Some people use different types of incenses. Some people like Palo Santo. That's another very well known smudging uh, product that you can use as well. Some people prefer that. I don't really care for Palo Santo just because I'm always afraid of a fire. Like I'm going to set something on fire with a stick. And not only that, I feel like it takes forever to light properly. So I don't really care for that. Whatever is the easiest to light, that's the most efficient and effective to use. That's what I usually prefer. You know, when you watch some of these programs and some of the old haunting shows, you always have someone on there who they're trying to smudge with sage, and they're going around and they're like all scared and they're like shivering and they're like, you know, be gone, evil spirits, or be gone. And I'm like, girl, what are you doing? Like, just by approaching it in that way, energetically and mentally, you're not creating an empowerment energy. You're not creating something that is going to attract positivity. You're approaching it with fear. Whenever you do something and you are in the depths of fear when you're doing it, you're probably not going to get back the kind of energy that you're looking for. That doesn't mean that you're not supposed to feel fear when you do anything in your life. It just means it can't be the primary energy that you are sustaining while you're doing it. That's why it's important that you do the technique properly, because if you aren't approaching the work, if you're not approaching it with the right mindset and also with the right, technique, it can come back and bite you in the butt. So you have to be very clear and intentional when you do a smudging ceremony. So my technique, because you're like, what is your technique, Fernie, right? You're like, what the hell is your technique? Get to it. So my technique is pretty simple. Here's what I would recommend. You make sure that your space is actually tidy, like physically tidy, because some of you may think, oh yeah, like I'm a hoarder and I've got like old buckets of KFC that are sitting there from like 5 years ago. That's gross. Like, first of all, get your ass up, go clean your house, because that's unacceptable. But secondly, once you've tidied up your space, which I always recommend doing this on a Sunday, because most people do their cleaning or their chores on the weekends or on a Sunday, or like when you're doing laundry. But tidy up your space, just get everything a little tidy, make it feel like it's all in order, because when something feels like it's in order, it feels like it's aligned, right? And that's more for a mental process, but also there is something to be said with having a more tidied up space and working from that, because it can also help you and your health and your mindset. So that's first. The second thing I would recommend is make sure that there isn't any distractions going on in your space that can piss you off or irk you. So if you're trying to do this on a Sunday, but all your kids are in the living room and they're playing video games and they're loud and obnoxious or whatever, you probably are not going to have the easiest or most enjoyable experience trying to smudge the space, because they're probably going to have some smart ass responses to you doing this, but they're also going to probably interfere with what you're trying to do. Now, if you want to include them in this, by all means, I would highly suggest you include your kids in it, because they can learn how to do this for themselves as well. And it is also an empowering strategy for them. But make sure that you have more control of your environment, that you can control kind of the vibe or the feel of it. And then what you'll do is you're going to put on your favorite music, whatever music that may be. Now, I would recommend you put on music that makes you feel strong or empowered or makes you feel great about yourself. For me, I can listen to the 80s, I can listen to some of the 90s. I mean, hell, I can put on Britney Spears. You damn well believe I'm going to get that place cleared out energetically when I'm listening to a little bit of the Oops, I Did It Again soundtrack. So you can clear out your space and have a tremendous effect by getting into that powerful high vibe state. So if you're listening to your music and you're like, feeling it, you even want to dance around, which makes it even better. That already is bringing you up, because music makes us feel better. Music can help us to feel good, or at least make us to feel a little bit better from what we were feeling before. So that's why I recommend that you listen to your favorite music, or just a song that you can really get empowered by or really feel connected to. And then once you listen to the music and you put it on and you're blasting it, you don't have to have it on like loud. You can put it in your earbuds and be walking around, with your earphones on. That works for you. That's fine too. So you're going to light a candle, listen to your music, start feeling that energy, start feeling that power. Light a candle. I recommend a purple, blue, or white candle, just because purple represents high spirituality. White represents purity and represents also the connection with God or the divine. Blue, I love blue. Blue's a very passionate color for me, but also because it's an emotional color. It represents emotions, and you really want to connect with that emotional energy, just because the emotional energy is what you're needing to shift some of that energy as well in your space. So lighting a candle, listening to your music, start feeling that connection. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your sage bundle or your loose leaf sage, if that's what it works for you, and you're going to essentially light it and get it to really start smoking. If it's a bundle, you're going to hold a bundle up and you're going to kind of run a lighter underneath it, just so that way you can light the tip or the end of it. And then once it really starts to catch, then you're going to blow out the fire, so that way all you have is the smoke coming from it. If it's loose leaf, then you're going to need to put it in something. I've over the years, I've used many different things. In my space right now, I have a abalone shell. And I use the abalone shell because I can pick it up and walk around with it if I need to. So I'll put a few loose leaves of the California desert sage, and I'll put it in there. And then I will light it. Once it catches, I'll make sure that the fire goes down, and then I'll go ahead and walk around and I'll start smoking the space that I'm going to smoke with it. If you're using incense, I mean, that you probably are going to need some sort of holder, because you don't want to drop like ashes everywhere. If you're using Palo Santo, you can use it the same way you use a bundle, where you're just holding one end and you're lighting the other end. Whenever I've traveled or like gone to houses to do a house clearing for someone, I always take some aluminum foil, because what I do with aluminum foil, and usually the thick foil, because I'll take a nice big sheet of aluminum foil and I'll crinkle it and I'll form a bowl with kind of a handle attached to it, and then I'll put the loose leaf sage inside of it. That works really, really well for a one-time use event. So if I'm going to be doing a house clearing energetically, that's what I've used. I've used the foil method because it catches all of the ashes and it does increase the heat that helps with the smoke. It also is easy to dispose of, because once you're done with it, you don't really need it anymore. I'll usually take it, I'll run it under a faucet just to make sure that any of the fire or any of the embers are out, and then I'll close up the foil in a nice little ball, and I know I'm good. And that's it. No mess, no fuss. So that's usually the way that I recommend doing it if you're going to be out doing it somewhere else. But when I'm at home, I'll use my abalone shell. That's the way I do it. Go and start at your front door. And I always recommend the front door because you want to make sure that you are essentially catching the energy or beginning where the energy comes into your space. And most of the time, with most people, the energy is entering into your space from the front door. And so what I do is I start at the front door, and then I just begin, once you've, like I said, lit your sage, it's smoking, you start with the front door and you just kind of go up and down across in a forward direction, or start going in the right direction. In other words, if you think of your space and you think of it the way that it's set up like a clock, you know how when you look at a clock, it's going forward, all the fingers, everything's moving forward. So if you were to put a clock over your home, that same direction, you're going to kind of move in that same direction because you want to make sure that you are moving forward. You're moving the energy forward. You're moving everything forward. So you want to start moving right in every space. So you face your front door from the inside, and then you start working to the right. So you go into that first room and you go against the walls, and and what I like to do, I'm listening to my music. I've got the smudge going. I got the little smoke coming out of it. I'm going up and down against the walls, just kind of making sure that I get it across a good area. I pretend, and make sure your hands are clean because you don't want to leave fingerprints or leave marks on your walls, but make sure that your hands are clean, and imagine that your hand is a stamp. You know, like if you're going to take a stamp and stamp a piece of paper or stamp something with ink, pretend that your hand is a stamp, but it's with hearts. So you're listening to your music, you've got your stage going, and then you stamp the walls with these imaginary hearts. And you're basically infusing your space, your walls with love. And that's what that represents. Because when you think of a heart, most people identify a heart with the sensation or with the energy of love. So that's what you're going to do. You're going to be infusing your space with love. And you want to raise the vibration. So you've got to get into a place of loving connection with it. So you're stamping the walls with hearts. You're jamming to your music. You've got the smoke going, and you're going to go in a clockwise direction or in a forward rightward direction, and go into that first room and do the entire room. And then as you go into the entire room, you're going to continue moving rightwards, but get closer and closer to the center, almost like a swirl into the center, because you want to get into the middle of your room, still smudging and still releasing all of those hearts and still feeling that emotion that you're feeling from your music. So that's the first room. And then you begin with the next room to the right side of the house. So if you have, if you're facing your front door, and there's a room to the left side, but then there's also a room right behind you, I would do the room right behind you because that's sticking to that rightward momentum. And you're going to do every single room starting from the entranceway and go into a right direction, and then the next room and then the next room. So you're going to do every single room the same way until you move in a huge right circle and a huge forward circle, clockwise circle of your entire home or your entire space. Once you're done and you get to the last room, then what you're going to do is you're going to take your sage, if it's still burning, and go ahead and if you need to put it out, go ahead and you can run it under a little bit of water if you want. That not like, don't drench it, just so that way you can kind of put it out. If you want, you can put it in a piece of foil, cover it up. It's going to go ahead and put itself out too, because it's going to stop having oxygen hitting it. If you're going to use like Palo Santo or something else, you might just want to have a bowl that you can just place it in while you finish your process. So once you're done with that whole process, with all of your space, then you want to go and open up a few windows and a few doors. Now, a few things you need to remember when you're going through the whole house: make sure that you get all the corners of your rooms, because energy can kind of get stuck in those corners, or get put into a corner, and then it kind of sits there. So you want to make sure you get all your little corners. And if you have a tall ceiling, just waft it up into that corner. Some people like to use feathers when they're smudging because it helps them move the smoke around. It's not just for ritualistic practices. So you can get like a turkey feather that they sell in most metaphysical stores. There are also other types of feather combinations that are way more expensive. That's why I like the foil method, because I can move it around really relatively easy, and it wafts it up for me. me. But if you want to use a feather, by all means, please use a feather, because if it makes it easier for you and you have high ceilings, you're probably going to need to waft up the smoke and get it up into those areas. But make sure you get all the corners. Make sure that you open drawers or cabinets, that you get some of it in there as well. And make sure that your closets are also cleared as well, because energy can fester in different places. It just depends. But once you do your whole home, you're going to open up a few windows, turn on some fans, make sure that your AC is off when you do this, because you don't want the smoke to get sucked into the AC unit. And then even when you are finished with it, you open the windows and you clear out the air. What ends up happening is you still have residual smoke in the AC unit. And then when you switch it on, if you have an AC central unit or a window unit, it will immediately blast out and you'll get a nice waft of it again. So that's not what you want to do. So make sure your AC units are closed or turned off when you're doing it. But once you have the windows and opens and stuff, you can turn on the ceiling fans, whatever, that's going to help kind of let the smoke escape. I have not really had to deal a lot with fire alarms going off, because whenever I've done it, I don't put the smoke up to the fire alarm. You're basically asking for it to like go off and make you nuts. So I would say waft, around it. But if your fire alarms do go off, it's probably because of the sage that you're using or what you're using in the ritual. When I've used California Desert Sage, I don't usually get the fire alarms turning on. When I've used the New Mexico sage or some of the other breeds that are out there, they definitely kick on the fire alarm. So that's why you just want to be careful not to get too close to the fire sensor, so that way you don't set off your alarms. But you open your windows, you open your doors, it's going to start to vacate and go ahead and escape the space. And I would give it about 15 minutes to an hour, depending on the amount of space you're dealing with, 15 minutes to an hour. So that way things can really start to move. But also the moment you open your windows, whatever residual negative energy is there, whatever energy you're still kind of grappling with, is going to vacate. It's going to get the hell out of there, because it's being overpowered and overwhelmed by the process of smudging. So that's it. It's that simple. It's that basic.